The smell of roasted chicken was pleasant, almost comforting, but the air in the room was different. It was thick, heavy, like a trap waiting to be sprung, and I knew I was the prey. As I stepped into the dining room, the clink of silverware and the soft strains of jazz barely concealed the undercurrent of tension humming beneath it all. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, posture crisp, his gaze calculating as if every person seated was a chess piece he could move at will. Elaine, my mother, flashed me her signature sweet smile, the one that always felt too perfect, too rehearsed. She wore pearls tonight, like she always did when she wanted to remind us of who she thought she was. Brianna was scrolling through her phone, her manicured nails tapping like a metronome on the screen. She barely looked up when I arrived, like I wasn't even worth the effort. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile lazy, like she knew the outcome of a game I hadn't been invited to play. I sat down slowly, my chair creaking in protest as if the furniture itself knew something I didn't. The candlelight flickered against the polished silverware, catching the edges of family portraits on the walls. Generations of Carters, all staring down at us as if to remind me where I stood. The youngest daughter? The dependable one. The one who fixed things when they broke. I glanced at the photo of my parents' wedding. Elaine in her satin gown, Richard in his military blues. That picture had always haunted me. Not because of what it showed, but because of everything it didn't. The expectations, the silent contracts, the way Elaine's hand curled possessively around Richard's arm, the way he looked through the camera instead of into it. It was the same look he wore now, focused, detached, as if he were already thinking 3 moves ahead. The conversation drifted, shallow and predictable. Elaine gushed about Brianna's new yoga obsession, something about hot stone therapy and moon phases. Richard mumbled about stock fluctuations, sipping from his glass without really tasting. Brianna, of course, updated us on her influencer deals, mentioning brand names like they were close friends. I forced a smile, my grip tightening on my fork. And then, as if on cue, the room stilled. Richard cleared his throat, a low practice sound that commanded attention, and looked directly at me. "We've been talking," he said, his voice smooth but firm, the kind that didn't invite input. "And we've decided Brianna will be moving into your apartment." The words landed like a fist to my ribs. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. I felt my breath catch, a coldness spreading from my fingertips to my chest. Elaine's eyes sparkled like she'd handed me a gift. "It just makes sense, darling," she chimed in, her tone laced with that infuriating sweetness. "You're hardly there, and Brianna needs a fresh start. It's only temporary, of course." Brianna finally looked up, a smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. The decision had already been made, and she knew it. My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral. I felt the sting of every past sacrifice tightening around my ribs. Co-signing Brianna's loan that wrecked my credit. Wiring money when Mom called crying about the mortgage. Covering legal fees after Brianna's DUI. I thought I'd move past it all, but here it was again, crashing down on me with the force of a tidal wave. The same pattern, the same roles, the same trap. I could hear my own voice in my head, sharp and angry, screaming, "No! This is my space, my life. How dare you decide for me again?" But when I opened my mouth, the words that came out were soft, measured. "Of course," I said lightly, my voice steady even as my pulse raced. "If it helps Brianna get back on her feet, I don't see why not." The silence that followed was almost as loud as a scream. Richard nodded, as if that settled it. Elaine's smile brightened, an actress soaking in applause. Brianna leaned back in her chair, triumphant, her phone forgotten for the first time all evening. But they didn't notice the tremor in my hand stilled by sheer force of will. They didn't see the way my gaze sharpened, the storm brewing behind my eyes. They thought my agreement was submission. They thought they'd won. Inside, I was screaming. Outside, I raised my glass, letting the stem rest against my lips like a seal. My hand was steady, my eyes unblinking. They didn't know what I'd done. While they celebrated their undeserved victory, I quietly rewrote the rules of the game. The apartment hummed with the low sound of city traffic beyond the glass. The glow from streetlights painted thin stripes across the hardwood floor, catching the edges of neatly stacked folders and manila envelopes that had been gathering dust for far too long. I sat cross-legged on the rug, a cup of tea cooling beside me, watching the shadows stretch as the night deepened. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the first folder. The paper inside smelled faintly of printer ink and regret. Richard's words floated through my mind, oily and slick. "You owe your sister this." That single phrase, delivered with a condescending calm, had stuck like a thorn under my skin, festering. The absurdity of it still twisted my stomach. I owed Brianna nothing. Not the apartment, not my time, not another sacrifice carved out of my life for her convenience. One by one, I laid out the evidence. The co-signed loan agreement from 3 years ago, the one that tanked my credit score when Brianna stopped making payments. A copy of the transfer confirmation from when I bailed out the family's mortgage. $2,000, gone in a single click, without so much as a thank you. The email thread where Richard had quietly listed me as a guarantor for a personal loan, never once asking if I was willing. That had been the breaking point, though I hadn't admitted it at the time. I pressed my hand against the stack, steadying my breath. The paper felt heavy, almost warm under my fingers, like it remembered too. The knock at the door was soft, almost hesitant. I rose slowly, moving with the deliberate calm I'd taught myself over years of swallowing my anger. When I opened it, Noah stood there, shoulders slightly hunched as if the weight of the city itself rested on him. His expression softened when he saw me, though his eyes flickered with concern. "Evening," he said, his voice low, measured. "Come in," I replied, stepping back. The scent of ink and paperwork seemed to shift as he entered, replaced by the faint, grounding scent of cedar and rain clinging to his jacket. He glanced at the table where I'd spread the documents, but he didn't comment. We sat at the counter, the lease agreement between us. I slid it over, my finger tapping on the dotted line. "I just need your signature here." Noah hesitated, pen poised. "Sienna, are you sure you're okay with this? With all of it?" His voice was gentle, careful, like he didn't want to disturb the surface tension holding me together. I nodded once, firm. "Yes, this is what I need." My tone was even, the kind of calm that comes after a storm has flattened everything in its path. The pen scratched across the paper, slow and deliberate. The sound felt final, like a lock clicking into place. When Noah finished, he glanced up at me, his gaze lingering in the way that asked silent questions. Questions I wasn't ready to answer. I folded the papers neatly, slid them into a folder, and let the silence fill the room. My mind drifted, unbidden, to that night years ago when I first learned the depth of Richard's manipulation. The late-night phone call, his voice tight but insistent, asking me to co-sign. "Just a formality," he'd said. The sharp jolt in my chest when the letters started arriving, warnings piling up like a slow avalanche. I hadn't told anyone. Not then. Not when my credit score nosedived. Not when I had to fight to qualify for my own lease. I'd carried it, like so many other things, but not anymore. I reached into the drawer, pulling out the spare keys to the apartment, the ones I'd used so often I could find them by touch. The metal was cold, biting against my palm. I closed my fist around them, feeling the subtle weight, the quiet power of a decision finally made. I placed the keys into Noah's hand. His fingers brushed mine, and for a second the air seemed to hum between us. Unspoken understanding, the kind that didn't need to be voiced. "This is done," I said, my voice steady. "No one else knows. Let's keep it that way." Noah nodded, a flicker of respect passing through his eyes before he pocketed the keys. "Understood." The quiet buzz of my phone on the counter cut through the stillness. I glanced at the screen. Group message, of course. My stomach turned even before I read it. "We'll bring Brianna's stuff over on Saturday. Hope you're ready." I let the screen dim without responding, the edges of the message burning into my vision like an afterimage. The storm was coming, but this time, I was ready. They showed up at my apartment like it was theirs, but the lock didn't recognize them anymore. I wasn't there to see it firsthand, but I could imagine the scene perfectly. The bright Texas sun baking the concrete, the moving truck idling by the curb, cardboard boxes labeled in Brianna's neat handwriting. Skincare, shoes, yoga mats. Elaine's nervous glances at her phone, Richard's tight jaw and crossed arms, Brianna's confident, almost smug stride toward the building like she already owned it. They'd probably rehearsed it, like a play, each of them playing their part, expecting me to open the door, step aside, and smile as they crossed the threshold. They didn't know I'd rewritten the script. I could almost hear Elaine's voice echoing in my head, that syrupy, sweet tone laced with steel. "Sienna, you're the responsible one. We trust you'll make this right." Those words had been a chain around my neck for years, but not anymore. The security camera at the front desk caught everything. Richard pressing the call button repeatedly, his patience fraying by the second. When no one buzzed them in, Elaine tried the door herself, jiggling the handle like maybe the building would remember who she was. Brianna stood with her arms folded, a flash of annoyance crossing her face as she looked around, her gaze briefly meeting the curious eyes of a neighbor peeking from a window above. And then Noah appeared. He walked out into the lobby, calm, composed, as if he'd been expecting them, which, in a way, he had. He wore dark jeans and a plain button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, holding a slim folder of papers in one hand. The moment Richard saw him, his face darkened. "Who the hell are you?" Richard's voice cut through the lobby, sharp enough to make a couple near the mailboxes glance over. Noah didn't flinch. His tone was even, almost gentle. "Noah Walker, I'm the legal tenant of this unit." He spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the ground under his feet was solid. Elaine blinked rapidly, as if the words didn't compute. No, there must be a mistake. This is Sienna's apartment. She told us Brianna could move in." Noah tilted his head slightly, a flicker of a smile tugging at his mouth. Just enough to be polite, not enough to be kind. "I'm afraid not. This unit is under my name as of last week. I have the lease agreement if you'd like to see it." Richard stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Where's Sienna? I need to speak with her." The way he said it, like a command, not a request, made my stomach twist, even from a distance. Noah remained rooted, calm. "She's unavailable." Elaine's voice cracked, a sharp edge of panic breaking through. "Please, just let us in for a minute. We'll talk to her directly. She'll understand once we explain." Noah shook his head once, slow and deliberate. "I'm sorry. I can't do that." His stance was steady, arms relaxed at his sides, but there was a quiet finality in his tone, like a door being closed and locked. Elaine tried to push past him, her hands clutching the strap of her purse, her voice climbing higher. "This is a family matter." Richard's glare darkened, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You don't get to decide who lives here. This isn't your business." Noah stayed where he was, unmoved. "Actually, it is." The tension in the air crackled like static, and someone, probably the neighbor who'd been watching from above, pulled out their phone and started recording. The faint chime of the elevator doors opening added to the scene, a mundane soundtrack to an unraveling family drama. Brianna's facade started to crack. Her shoulders hunched inward, and she let out a sharp, frustrated breath. "This is insane," she muttered, her voice tight, her eyes darting around the lobby as if looking for an exit that didn't exist. The edge of her voice quivered. Fear, maybe, or the realization that the rules had shifted and she wasn't holding the cards anymore. Elaine's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down at the screen, her breath catching. Her fingers trembled as she pressed it to her ear. "Sienna?" Her voice was thin, brittle, almost breaking. Sienna, what's happening? What is this? I let a beat of silence stretch, the tension hanging heavy over the line. And then I spoke, calm and clear, a smile curling in my voice like smoke from a slow-burning fire. You never asked where Brianna was moving into. They thought they had won, until I walked in, holding a cup of coffee like it was a weapon. The hallway hummed with tension as soon as I stepped out of the elevator. The afternoon light streamed through the windows in soft golden slants, but it felt too warm, too bright, like the air itself was watching. My shoes clicked softly on the polished floor as I approached, every step measured, deliberate. The scent of roasted beans lingered in the cup I held, warmth in my palm, a small, steady weight in a scene ready to combust. Richard's voice hit me first. This is outrageous. She can't do this. It boomed down the hallway, bouncing off the high ceilings, sharp enough to make a couple of neighbors flinch. Elaine was crying, her voice pitched high and ragged, while Brianna stood frozen, her arms crossed so tightly they might snap in half. Noah stood by the door, calm and steady as a stone, arms crossed, his gaze locked on Richard like a silent warning. For a moment, no one noticed me. I let it linger, let the scene unfold like a play I'd already read the script for. Then Richard turned, mid-rant, and saw me. His voice cut off, his mouth tightening into a grim, furious line. Elaine let out a soft gasp, her mascara smudged under her eyes, and Brianna's face crumpled, a flush rising from her neck, eyes glassy and wet. Sienna, Richard barked, his voice laced with command. What is this circus? You've humiliated us in front of the entire building. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warmth bloom across my tongue, steadying my breath. The bitterness was grounding, sharp and clean. I told you, I said evenly, my voice low but clear enough to carry. This isn't your house. This is mine. And I decide who lives here. Elaine stepped forward, her hand clutching at her chest like she needed something to hold on to. Sienna, please, she pleaded, her voice breaking. You're tearing the family apart. Brianna has nowhere to go. What are you doing to your own sister? Her words cracked like thin ice underfoot, but I didn't flinch. I'm doing what I should have done years ago, I replied, my tone as smooth as the coffee in my hand. I turned slightly, catching the movement of phones raised, neighbors recording, whispering, documenting the spectacle unfolding. Brianna's voice wobbled, barely above a whisper. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I looked at her, really looked at her. The entitled tilt of her chin was gone, replaced by something smaller, more fragile. The person who had once stood so tall in her own story now looked like a child caught in the rain. Richard's fists clenched at his sides, his voice thundering again. You're throwing away family for what? Pride? Money? A grudge? I tilted my head slightly, letting the pause linger just long enough for the weight of his words to sink. The hallway buzzed with low murmurs, a neighbor's dog barking distantly in the background. You talk about family, Dad, I said, my voice calm but edged like a blade. Let's talk about family, shall we? I reached into my bag, pulling out the folder, neat, precise, damning. I held it up, flipping it open for them to see. This is the loan you took out in my name without asking, the one that nearly destroyed my credit. This is the transfer I made to cover the mortgage after you let it lapse. $2,000 gone without a word of thanks. This is Brianna's unpaid car note I co-signed. Remember that? No, I'm sure you don't. Elaine's breath hitched like she'd been slapped. Brianna's face twisted, her eyes filling as she shook her head, her voice cracking. You're bringing this up now? You're trying to humiliate us? Richard's voice rose, low and dangerous, a sharp warning. Sienna, enough. I met his gaze head-on, unflinching. Number enough was years ago. I let it happen then, but not anymore. I let the folder hang in the air for a heartbeat longer before I tucked it back into my bag. The hallway seemed to vibrate, the weight of unspoken things pressing in. Elaine let out a choked sob, her hands trembling. Brianna turned away, her shoulders shaking, one hand wiping at her eyes in a frantic, angry swipe. Richard just stared, his jaw tight, his chest rising and falling like a storm was building inside him. "This isn't over," he growled, low and seething. I took another sip of my coffee, letting it linger before I spoke. "It is for me." The hallway fell into a stunned, charged silence, broken only by the distant sound of a neighbor's phone chime and the faint rustle of someone whispering. Richard's voice, when it finally came, was quieter but colder, sharper, like the edge of a knife. His eyes narrowed and he spoke slowly, each word deliberate and dangerous. "You will regret this, Sienna." I thought the battle was over, until the internet lit up with lies and half-truths. The morning light filtered through the blinds of my new apartment, soft and indifferent to the storm brewing outside. The scent of coffee drifted through the room, but it tasted flat on my tongue, bitterness lingering beneath each sip. My phone buzzed relentlessly, vibrating against the marble countertop like a warning bell. I knew before I picked it up. I knew it would be them. Elaine had posted first. A long, winding Facebook post that bled across my screen, written in that breathless, dramatic tone she always reserved for family gatherings and holiday cards. The photos came first. Brianna as a baby, Richard holding her in his arms, me awkwardly smiling in the corner. The captions stung with their syrupy sweetness, a weapon disguised as nostalgia. "Family is everything," the post read, "but sometimes we lose sight of that. My heart is broken. My daughters should have been there for each other, but money, greed, and bitterness tore us apart. Brianna deserves better. She deserves love, a home, support. I never imagined it would come to this. Please keep us in your prayers." The comments flooded in. "Sending prayers. So sorry you're going through this. That's heartbreaking. Stay strong." Brianna played her part too, of course. A series of cryptic Instagram stories, a black screen with white text. "Family is forever, unless they forget you exist." Followed by a shaky video of her wiping her eyes, set to some moody indie song. The hashtags glowed beneath it all. # betrayed, # family first, # heartbroken. I stared at the screen, my pulse a low, steady thrum in my ears. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. Familiar, predictable, but still impossible to look away. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled. People I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins, distant relatives, old family friends, commented with wide-eyed sympathy, painting me as the villain in their narrative. I thought of every dollar I'd handed over, every secret I'd swallowed, every time I'd been told I was the strong one as they took and took and took. The weight of it sat on my chest, heavy and suffocating. Noah's voice cut through the fog, steady, grounding. "You can't let this stand." He was sitting at my kitchen table, flipping through the folder I'd assembled like it was a legal brief. His eyes met mine, calm but fierce. "They're controlling the narrative, Sienna. It's time you told your story." I hesitated, the weight of exposure thick in my lungs. Part of me wanted to let it go, to stay silent and let the storm pass. But then I thought of Richard's voice years ago. "In this family, we don't air dirty laundry in public." The memory sharpened like glass under my skin. "Guess what, Dad? Today is laundry day." I opened my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, I just stared, the cursor blinking back at me like a silent dare. And then I started typing. The post wasn't flowery, it wasn't emotional, it was facts. Cold, unflinching, backed by evidence. Screenshot. The loan agreement with Richard's signature and my name as the guarantor. Screenshot. The $2,000 transfer I made to save the family home. Screenshot. The collections notice from Brianna's car loan. Screenshot. The lease agreement Noah had signed last week. Screenshot. The email from Brianna calling me a robot for refusing to bail her out of a DUI. Each image sat stark against the white background, undeniable and damning. And then the final line. I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped letting them abandon me. I hit post. It spread like wildfire. Within minutes, comments started pouring in. Some supportive, "Wow, you've been through so much. Stay strong." Others skeptical. There are two sides to every story. But the tide was turning. For every hand-wringing sympathy post under Elaine's sob story, there was now someone asking, "Did you see Sienna's post? The receipts don't lie." The notifications kept coming. Likes, shares, comments piling up like embers sparking a bigger blaze. I leaned back, the tension in my shoulders slowly unwinding as I watched the narrative shift. For the first time, the story wasn't being told about me. It was mine. And then, just as the buzz began to settle, my phone buzzed again. This time with a name I didn't recognize. "Hi, Sienna. This is Laura Harris from the Austin Chronicle. We've been following your story, and we'd love to do an interview on family manipulation and financial abuse. Let me know if you're open to sharing more." I stared at the message, the weight of it sinking in. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The noise had faded, but I knew the silence meant they were regrouping. The city outside my window glowed under a fading sunset. The sky a soft wash of amber and violet. From my balcony, the world looked almost still. Cars moving in slow streams of light. The hum of distant traffic softened by distance. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug, letting the steam curl up and brush my face like a quiet reminder that I was here, in this moment, and that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the next demand, the next sacrifice. I thought about the nights I'd spent curled in on myself, crying into a pillow while the weight of family expectations sat on my chest like stacked bricks. Each obligation, each unspoken rule, another stone I'd tried to balance. I thought about the way guilt had been woven into my bones, how it had whispered that I owed them my silence, my money, my time. The echoes of that guilt still lingered, faint but stubborn, like a scar that still itched when the weather changed. But tonight, the air tasted different. Lighter, somehow. The sound of a soft knock drew my gaze to the door. Noah stood there, holding a small pot with a cactus inside. Its spines sharp, its form compact, stubbornly alive. "This little guy felt like a good fit for you," he said, offering it with a quiet smile. I let out a breath that was almost a laugh, the tension slipping off my shoulders like a too heavy coat. "Because I'm prickly?" "Because you survive in places most people can't," he replied simply, his tone warm and steady. He stepped onto the balcony with me, leaning on the railing, his presence calm and unobtrusive. The kind of presence that didn't ask for anything, didn't take up space I wasn't willing to give. We stood in silence for a while, the evening light painting long shadows across the balcony floor. Noah glanced at me sideways, a half smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I didn't expect to become the villain in someone's family drama," he mused, his voice light but not mocking. I smiled, a real one this time. Small, tentative, but real. The kind that felt like it might stick around for a while. "Welcome to the cast," I said softly. We didn't talk about the chaos that had unfolded, the social media posts that had vanished, the messages that had stopped. Richard, Elaine, and Brianna had gone quiet, retreating into whatever version of the story they were telling themselves now. I didn't need to know. The absence of their voices was a kind of music I hadn't known I'd been missing. Noah's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it but didn't pick it up. Mine lay on the table beside the cactus, the screen dark, until it lit up with a new email notification. My breath caught as I read the subject line. Exclusive interview invitation. Family betrayal and financial abuse. Your story matters. The cursor blinked in the corner of the screen, waiting. I stared at it, the hum of the city fading into the background. Part of me wanted to close the laptop, to let it go, to enjoy the quiet I'd fought so hard for. But another part, the part that had survived all these years, the part that had quietly carried every secret, every injustice, every silent scream. She wanted to be heard. Noah's voice was soft, almost a murmur. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. I traced the rim of my mug with my fingertip, the warmth grounding me. The cactus sat between us, a small, stubborn thing refusing to wilt. Maybe it was time to stop wilting too. I whispered to myself, so quiet it barely escaped my lips, but real enough to settle into the air. Maybe it's time the truth spoke. The echoes of their accusations may have faded, but the silence they left behind spoke volumes, a quiet testament to the weight of their defeat. For years, Sienna had carried the burden of their expectations, their manipulation, their debts. But now she stood free, her truth no longer buried. Justice had arrived not with a grand fanfare, but with quiet certainty, revealing that power built on lies is as fragile as glass under pressure. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Sometimes the boldest step is simply refusing to carry what was never yours to hold.